Okay, back to cultivate this part 2. This cultivating on. Oh, lost my spot. Hang on. So, fear porn. That's right. So, when we're listening to particular news broadcast systems, or even philosophical or psychological ideas and thought processes, this is imperative to our growth to understand how people have done it before us, how people are doing it now, and whatever else. But when they are giving you literal piles of poo and just leaving it there, and then sprinkling their own poo of fear and dread and doom on it, that's fertilizer for that cultivation to take place, if you will. That's fertilizer, because by putting you in the state of fear and panic and giving you no solution, no process to work through, no real light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not saying hope here. Hope can kind of be a little bit dangerous, but at least a landscape to look out over, to carve your own path through. When they fail in that and they just want to dump a lot of fear on you, your brain is left with nothing to hold on to but the person on the screen. That's how kind of we work through stuff, is like, this guy's telling me the truth. This person is being honest with me. I feel so grateful that they're out there at least speaking the truth. And so when we are left with that feeling of, oh, somebody understands it, somebody gets it, someone is kind of like me and wants the truth and wants a better understanding and wants to know what's really going on in the world, and then they give you nothing but airspace, nothing but your own silence to sit with little or no comprehension or pathway through the deep dark jungle, you begin to adhere yourself to that person, because that person automatically becomes the way out. Does that make sense? That person, that voice, that picture, that video, that entity automatically, by default, while they might not even realize it, becomes the only way out. Becomes almost like an addiction. If I listen tomorrow, maybe I'll get more insight. If I just keep, maybe it'll get better. It'll get better. And while they'll give you little seeds here and there to kind of put up, they're not your seeds. They're their seeds. They're not even your seeds. So rather than telling you how to process through this or giving you a few steps to take, maybe in your own direction, they're taking you along their path. And now you've got to cultivate their seeds for them. That's a recipe for disaster, kids. Lordy. You have to be careful. You have to be really mindful of how you're cultivating your own soil. And this is why I've had it for a while that I wanted to start a YouTube channel. This was the little subconscious thing in the back of my head going, no, that's a bad idea. Not good. So this is why after this, I'll probably have so much more confidence in moving forward, because I know I've been an Akko Taco in the last videos. So I can already feel the weight lifting. So when we set ourselves up in a structured manner, we have a foundation, which is our soil. We begin to start to feel a little bit freer, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more encouraged that we are in power, that we have control over ourselves. That's it, that's all. We have control over ourselves. And we don't need to be subject to somebody else's seeds or somebody else's soil or somebody else's fear, pain, misery, agony, joy, hope, love, faith. Anything that you can possibly imagine, from the smallest of emotions to the largest of ideas. They're not ours. They're someone else's. So this is you bringing back that power to yourself and deciding what you want. If there's a big freaking rock while you're tilling through your soul, you pick it up, look at it, ask yourself, does this even look familiar to me? And then you might believe something because you have that rock in your soil. There might be a core belief attached to that, like, if you don't have a 9-to-5 job with steady income and insurance and security and stability, you're a piece of shit and you're worthless to the community. You serve no purpose here. And you look at it and you're like, oh, I didn't come up with this. It's not mine. What happened? What did I do to put this in my garden? And then you realize you didn't even put it there. So you're like, this isn't mine. This doesn't belong to me. This is not how I can't proceed forward with this. I can't. There's no way for me to move forward in my life and in my truth and on my path if I keep this rock in my garden. So what do? Bye. Not mine. Now I can move forward. That's what cultivating is. You take the things that are in your soil and you pull out what you don't want. So when we are moving forward in this vulnerable state we are in right now, don't give in to that fear. It's okay to feel the fear. It's totally okay to feel any scope of emotion when it comes to this. Fear, betrayal, abandonment, outrage, anger, frustration, absolute bewilderment as to what incarnation is going on. Totally allowable. Don't ever deny yourself that. But don't act upon it either. Our emotions are just little triggers and signifiers that, you know what, something's not right here, or something is right here. Or maybe I need to look at this further so I understand what I'm supposed to do or where I'm supposed to go. Emotions are like little instructors, gurus, saviors, whatever it is you want to call it. They're just little signifiers of like, this might be going in the wrong direction, or hey, this is good. Now that's not to be confused with a pleasure that facilitates addiction. That's not, people say follow your bliss. Yeah, follow your bliss. Not your pleasure, your bliss. The thing that literally makes you light up. Drinking doesn't make you light up. I suppose maybe cocaine does, but that's not the right kind of light. So when you're looking at processing through this, and you find those beliefs you don't really like, you don't know where they came from, and you're like, I don't want this, and you're still holding on to it because sometimes it's the only thing you've ever known. It's the only thing you've ever been taught. And so if you let go of that, and there's nothing there, what do you have in exchange? You have an open hand. And for some people, that's terrifying. There's nothing for them to hold on to. And it can be a scary experience. It can be absolutely just stagnifying. So rather than be stuck in that fear, panic, anger, frustration mode, realize it's just something else can be put there of your choosing. You get to choose what goes there. So if you want the same thing you had before there, you're probably going to get it in a different way, in a different manner, in a different form. But if you choose something that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone, you might be amazed at what grows there instead. Just saying. So when you're in the state of vulnerability, don't become susceptible to subscribing to something that is outside of yourself, that somebody's trying to train you into believe that's going to get you to where you were or how life is supposed to be, or maybe they take you in a whole nother direction and tell you this is your new reality, this is how you have to live. So putting the responsibility again in someone else's hands, extremely, extremely dangerous. You get to choose, but make sure you're the one who actually wants it, not what somebody else is telling you to want. This is how you nip the cult in the bud. You set up, when crap happens, you sit down and you have no choice but to ask yourself, what the heck? I'm about to lose my house. How am I going to do this? What do you say to yourself? You're like, okay, so if you just take that, okay, I'm going to lose my house. How am I going to deal with this? What are you going to do after that? What do you get through that fear and panic? What do you say to yourself? What do I want? Where do I want to go? How are we going to operate? You get to make those decisions rather than listening to somebody else tell you how you should think, how you should feel, how you should operate, where you should live. All those things. You have to make sure that you are the one making the decisions. Okay. So they'll pitch you what's called a soft sell. And this is where they choose the resonators. This is where they really get you. They get you really good. If you look into any of the beginnings of any cult, a few of their little seed ideas are really intriguing. You're like, oh, I can see how that could work. I can understand how this process has real growth here. There's potential for real growth here. There's a real way through this. And because you are because you're in a vulnerable state and you're susceptible more so now to anybody's ideas or thoughts or opinions on how you should move forward, you're gonna latch onto that much more easier than you would have had you had a stable house, a stable income, and whatever else. So you basically have to put yourself into that same system. If I had still a house, I still had a job, I still had this, would I latch on to this as much as I am right now? And the answer is probably no, not so much. So you need to keep your susceptibility and vulnerability in check. So then what they do when you are broken down and you have no reality to base your life off of, you start to be susceptible to other people forming your reality. Again, things that we're trying to cultivate out of our soil. We want to create our own reality. We want to find our own way through this, our own purpose, which was the intent in the first place. So we need to find out what we're supposed to be doing. And believe it or not, it's not drudgery. We're not supposed to hate our lives. That's not what was intended for anyone on the planet. We are not supposed to be somebody else's slave worker. And that's also what cults do, is they make you a slave. You are there to serve their needs, their wants, their whatevers. So finding that which in yourself gives you fruition and growth and a hero's journey, if you will, not only provides for you, but a lot of people find that if you share your story of the hero's journey, you're indirectly giving permission for others to do the same. And you don't need to become a deity while you're doing it. That's the cool part. Just share it. Just give it. Just offer it. And say, hey, this is doable. It's conquerable. Here's how I did it. That's all you need to say. You don't need to go out and tell people what to believe or how to conduct themselves or who to serve, who not to serve. You serve yourself. Because we forget that there's that divine spark within each of us. And it's right there, ready to give you all the information you need. You just have to want it. You have to ask for it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to be willing to receive the messages from it. You don't need another person to tap into this. You just need yourself. So, next one. So, again, back to the leader being the only person that you're allowed to go to. They'll take away your family, your friends, your outside world. You know, by now you've probably quit your job, whatever it is, and they've taken over. So the only access that you have to any sort of reality or life is through this leader person. So they've constructed this reality for you, helped you understand that this is the only way forward, and then basically claimed all agency over your life. Not a good feeling. Then we have an external enemy. So, for those of you who watch any documentary on any cult religion, there's always an enemy. And usually, the enemy is everyone who is not in the cult. Cute, huh? So, when you have people going out and screaming about, you know, how we're being so persecuted, it may or may not be true, but at the same time, what are you being called to? What are you being enlisted for when they're screaming that we're being persecuted? What does that invoke in people? What happens? How do people respond and react? Your beliefs do not define you. Your behavior does. And all you need to do to identify a cult is look at the behaviors of its members. Not such a big, huge dilemma anymore, is it? Because when we target a specific group of people who vehemently insist that they're doing good on the planet and they're clearing the planet, and then its members come out and they're raping children, they're, you know, abusing their coworkers verbally, and then you do research. The way I found out about a specific cult was a little group called Anonymous, and I was like, I didn't even know what Anonymous was. And I'm like, what is going? This is peculiar. This is okay. So you got to do some digging. You got to do some research, and they were, you know, protesting a legit cult. And that's the only way I found out about the cult, was because they were making a big fuss about it. And of course, as cult leaders do, they responded inappropriately. But then I discovered this other group of people who kind of had the constructs of a cult. And so when you dig deeper into it, God help you, have to go to 4chan. When you dig deeper, though, you really begin to understand that, oh my goodness, this is really, really kind of amazing that these people who really dig deep into life and the darker concepts of humanity, and they're there for the lulz. So if you deconstruct that, they're actually doing the best shadow work that has ever been done probably on the planet. Because they're processing through all of this crap that humanity has to offer us, and they're making light of it. They're joking about it. So I would venture to assume that all these rando people are probably pretty well versed in emotional intelligence. Something you never thought you'd hear about 4chan. But in all reality, what is the truth is that they did start a movement of people. And at the beginning, it was pretty shaky. They were, just coming up with some inventive ideas, some of which were illegal. And there's the wise bearded man who made a video and kind of honed him back in. But he did something that was brilliant and crucial. He didn't take their power away. He didn't demonize them. He didn't downgrade them. He praised them for their actual, processing of, hey, this isn't okay. This isn't right. People are being hurt here. We need to do something about it. And they got impassioned about it. And they put out, this brilliant call to arms, if you will. And you begin to understand that there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with holding people accountable. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually the best way to function. And this guy just said, look, don't do anything illegal. And 4chan never set out to harm anyone. They just set out to make these people's lives a little more inconvenient, albeit in not so great ways. So understanding that the methodology of getting through to people is all they needed to do to redirect their horses in the most powerful direction, if you will. And it worked kind of brilliant. It really did. And you can see that in their furthering of working it in a very effective manner. It's kind of incredible, some of the things that they've brought to light. And I would say that because of their level of accountability, they don't even qualify. They qualify as an effective force for good. Scary that, isn't it? I know I'm gonna get so much flack for this. So peer pressure, people will say, this worked for me. Why can't you do it? This worked for so many other people. I believe this. Why don't you believe it? If you don't believe it, you're damned. You're going to not Valhalla. Whatever. You are now becoming someone who is not only going to be not engaging, but now you have become a source of what people call evil. You're evil. So we really need to keep ourselves in check when we're trying to navigate through these fields of whatever. We don't need to waste our time on doing that. We can see people as away from the light and they need to go through a dark period. That's fine. Do you need to be in the depths with those people? Not necessarily, but you don't abandon them. And this is a common theme when you actually find a good documentary, a good breakdown of the cults, is do not abandon anyone who you suspect or you know for sure could be in a cult. Do not abandon them. That's one way to isolate them even further into this. Keep in touch. Keep yourself available. Understand that there may or may not come a day when they are ready to break free from those chains, and just keep yourself connected. As difficult as that may be, because a lot of times they're indoctrinated into shaming you, making you feel less than, completely ripping your life apart because you have chosen the path that they're not on. demonizing you. And sometimes they might even cut you off themselves because of the indoctrination. And that all you can do is just keep trying, keep going, keep making yourself available for open discussion, and if they need help, you're there. So I can't stress that enough, because that's how people stay in. They don't see another way out when things get really bad. So keep a little bit of something there for them to reach out for. So by the time they've been fully indoctrinated and whatever else, and they have their group solidified, if you will, the system of indoctrination reveals the cult leader for who they are. You know, when Jim Jones took his 917 human beings to a completely different country, by then it was like 1984 in a little small area of the planet. 24/7, Jim Jones, over an intercom system that you cannot get away from. Starving because there's not enough food. He didn't provide provisions. But instead, coming across weapons and bombs that were invested in rather than food. So, I mean, you're basically, in hell on earth at the end. And you realize that what you probably knew in the back of your head was a narcissistic sociopathic. That's what you followed. And I would venture to say that we've all seen little red flags of different people that we know. Probably, I don't know, I want to say at least, maybe even 100% of the people on the planet have somehow, some way, somewhere witnessed some semblance, whether they know it or not, of how this potential really creates itself, sometimes very innocently, and to keep yourself in check. Even if you can't reach to the other person and say, could you just a little bit think about what you're doing right now and the effects that it may or may not be having? Could we just take that into consideration a smidgen bit? And usually that's shut down. And you'll notice your comments are being taken off. And you're like, I just gently asked you to consider what it is that's really going on here. And you felt threatened by it. Oh! So when people turn cowardice and are not able to be questioned, bye, Felicia. Just keep that in mind, that it's okay to set those rules of conduct, what boundaries are. They're rules of conduct. There's not walls. Then you don't build yourself a freaking fortress. You set rules, concrete rules for yourself to follow first. More importantly, yourself. So when you follow them yourself, you can easily see when others are not. And you set that up in a way that you don't deviate from it for any reason. Nobody can push that or pull that away from you. It's a concrete, balanced, an even path. So that when you do come upon this, that inner list of values and boundaries, the rules of conduct, don't go anywhere under any circumstances. The rules of conduct remain the same. And that's how you avoid getting into scenarios and situations that could lead you down an even worse path that you've already gone through. Set your values, your rules of conduct, and everything in order. Then move forward with planting the seeds you want to produce in your life. That is your choice, your right. And be exploratory. Don't limit yourself to what may have gone before or what may look pretty in somebody else's garden may not be what's right for yours. Really use your intuition and your inner knowing and whatever the heck else you want to call it to move forward. Keep your rules in the eye of the storm. Keep your knowing in the eye of the storm. Watch it, walk through it, don't avoid it, but don't let it deter you from going after what it is that you know you want.